The cruelest mistake isn't rejecting someone who loves you. It's discovering the truth after they're already gone. The words would haunt Alpha Lucas Blackwood for the rest of his life. But on the night everything began, he had no idea he was about to destroy the one person who had quietly stood beside him through every storm. Moonlight spilled across the stone courtyard of Blackwood Park like liquid silver, washing over the gathered wolves dressed in their finest formal attire. Hundreds of voices blended into a restless hum beneath the stars as the annual moon ceremony unfolded. Lanterns swayed gently in the cool evening breeze, casting golden light across polished marble and carefully arranged white roses. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night of honor and tradition. Instead, it would become the night Emily Carter's heart broke. Emily stood near the edge of the courtyard, trying to make herself invisible. Her pale blue dress was simple compared to the expensive gowns surrounding her, but she wore it with quiet grace. She kept her hands folded in front of her and her gaze lowered, hoping the evening would pass without drawing attention. She had spent most of her life doing exactly that. While others fought for recognition, Emily worked quietly behind the scenes. She volunteered at the healing center. She helped elderly pack members repair their homes after winter storms. She stayed late after community events to clean when everyone else had already gone home. Most people barely noticed. That was fine with her. Kindness was never something she offered for praise. Across the courtyard stood Alpha Lucas Blackwood. Tall, confident, and respected throughout the Northern Territories. He carried the weight of leadership as naturally as breathing. His dark suit contrasted sharply against the pale moonlight, and every conversation seemed to pause whenever he moved. Emily's eyes drifted toward him despite herself. For years, she had admired him from a distance. Not because he was powerful, not because he was alpha, but because she believed there was goodness beneath his reserved exterior. She believed he cared. Tonight would prove how wrong she was. A sudden commotion rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire from one group to another. Curious glances shifted toward the eastern corridor leading to the Alpha house. Emily frowned as she noticed several wolves staring directly at her. Confusion twisted inside her chest. Then she saw Vanessa Hale emerging from the crowd. Vanessa's expression carried the perfect mixture of shock and disappointment, the kind that looked sincere from a distance. Alpha Lucas deserves to know the truth, Vanessa announced loudly enough for dozens of people to hear. The courtyard fell silent. Emily's pulse quickened. What truth? Someone asked. Vanessa's eyes locked onto Emily. The truth about why she was leaving the Alpha house tonight. A murmur swept through the gathering. Emily's face drained of color. I wasn't leaving the Alpha house, she said softly. I haven't even been inside. But the whispers only grew louder. Vanessa stepped forward, holding up a small silver box. Gasps erupted around them. Emily recognized it immediately. The ceremonial moon crest. An heirloom belonging to the Alpha family. Then how do you explain this? Vanessa asked. It was found near your belongings. Emily stared at the object in disbelief. She had never touched it, never even seen it up close. I don't know, she whispered. I didn't take anything. Her voice trembled as more eyes turned toward her. Some skeptical, some disappointed, others eager for gossip. Then the crowd parted. Lucas Blackwood stepped forward. His silver-gray eyes settled on Emily. For a brief moment, she expected him to ask questions, to listen, to give her the same trust she had given him for years. Instead, his expression hardened, and Emily felt the first crack appear in the future she had once dreamed of. The silence that followed felt heavier than the night air itself. Emily could feel hundreds of eyes fixed on her as Lucas Blackwood stepped closer. The lantern light caught the sharp lines of his face, but there was no warmth in his expression. No trace of the quiet understanding she had always believed existed between them. Only disappointment. Only judgment. Emily swallowed hard and forced herself to meet his gaze. Lucas, I did not take it, she said softly. Her voice was barely louder than the wind moving through the roses. I have never even touched the moon crest. For a moment, she waited for him to say something reassuring, to ask how the heirloom had appeared near her belongings, to question the accusation. Instead, his eyes shifted toward the silver box in Vanessa Hale's hands. The moon crest was secured inside the Alpha house less than an hour ago, Lucas said. His voice was calm, but it carried across the entire courtyard. Only a few people had access to that area. Emily felt her chest tighten. Then someone put it there. Are you saying someone framed you? Vanessa asked. Her tone sounded concerned, but the faint satisfaction hidden beneath it did not escape Emily. Yes, Emily answered immediately. Because I did not do this. More whispers spread through the crowd. Some wolves exchanged doubtful looks. Others shook their heads. Emily recognized many of them. She had helped their families. She had sat beside their hospital beds. She had brought food during difficult winters. Yet now none of that seemed to matter. One accusation was enough to erase years of kindness. Lucas remained silent. That silence hurt more than any accusation ever could. Emily remembered the countless moments she had defended him when others called him cold. She had always believed leadership forced him to hide his emotions. She had convinced herself there was a compassionate man beneath the responsibility. Standing there now, she wondered if she had imagined him entirely. Vanessa stepped forward again. There is more, she said carefully. A guard reported seeing Emily leaving the eastern corridor shortly before the heirloom disappeared. Emily stared at her. That is not true. The guard had no reason to lie. Neither do I. The words escaped before she could stop them. The crowd shifted uneasily. Lucas finally looked directly at her. Were you near the Alpha House tonight? Emily hesitated. Earlier that evening, she had delivered medical supplies to an elderly healer whose cottage sat near the eastern path. The route happened to pass behind the Alpha House. She knew how her answer would sound. I walked near the corridor, she admitted. But I never entered the building. A wave of murmurs rolled through the gathering. Emily immediately regretted speaking. Vanessa lowered her eyes as if saddened by the confession. Then perhaps the evidence speaks for itself. Emily felt the ground slipping beneath her feet. Every explanation seemed to make things worse. Lucas took a slow breath. His expression hardened further. Until this matter is resolved, you will remain under observation. The words landed like ice in her chest. Not because of what they meant, because he had chosen suspicion over trust. Emily looked at him one last time, searching desperately for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he believed her. She found none, and somewhere deep inside her heart, something fragile began to break. The following morning arrived beneath a sky the color of cold steel. Blackwood Pack should have been waking to the lingering joy of the moon ceremony, but an uneasy tension hung over the territory like a storm that refused to break. Emily Carter sat alone in a small guest room inside the administration lodge where she had been asked to remain until the investigation concluded. Asked. That was the word everyone used. Yet every glance from the guards outside the door reminded her that trust had already disappeared. She stared out the window toward the distant pine trees swaying beyond the village square. For the first time in years, she felt like a stranger in the place she had always called home. A quiet knock sounded. The door opened before she could answer. Vanessa Hale stepped inside carrying a tray with tea and breakfast pastries. Her smile was gentle enough to fool anyone who did not know better. I thought you might need something to eat, Vanessa said. Emily looked away. Why are you doing this? Vanessa placed the tray on the table. Doing what? Pretending to care. For the briefest moment, Vanessa's pleasant expression flickered. Then it returned. I am sorry things turned out this way. Emily let out a small laugh that held no amusement. No, you are not. Vanessa offered no reply. The silence between them confirmed everything Emily already suspected. A few hours later, the entire pack was summoned to the central gathering hall. Long rows of seats filled quickly. Conversations remained hushed as wolves exchanged nervous looks. Emily felt dozens of eyes follow her as she entered. Lucas Blackwood stood near the elevated platform at the front of the room. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable. Emily searched for uncertainty in his face. She found none. An elder stepped forward and cleared his throat. After reviewing witness statements and available evidence, leadership has reached a decision. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She folded her hands tightly together. Although the moon crest has been recovered, serious concerns remain regarding conduct unbecoming of a trusted pack member. The elder paused. As Alpha, Lucas Blackwood will issue the final ruling. The room became perfectly silent. Lucas stepped forward. Every movement felt measured, deliberate. Emily could barely breathe. For years, Blackwood Pack has been built upon trust, Lucas said. Without trust, we cannot stand together. His voice remained calm, professional, distant. The evidence presented has damaged that trust. Emily stared at him. waiting, hoping, praying. Therefore, Lucas continued, I can no longer maintain the bond between us. The words struck harder than she expected. The room seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Gasps echoed across the hall. Someone covered their mouth. Others lowered their eyes. Emily felt every hopeful dream she had carefully protected for years begin to crumble. Lucas looked directly at her. Emily Carter, I reject you. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence felt endless. Emily's chest tightened as tears threatened to surface, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. She lifted her chin despite the ache spreading through her heart. The man she had believed in had chosen judgment over faith, suspicion over truth. Vanessa lowered her gaze to hide the satisfaction in her eyes. Around the hall, whispers began again, but Emily barely heard them. She looked at Lucas one final time. Then she realized something that frightened her more than the rejection itself. The person she was looking at no longer felt familiar at all. Emily left Blackwood Pack before sunrise the next morning. No farewell ceremony marked her departure. No friends gathered at the gates. No one asked her to stay. A thin layer of morning fog drifted across the winding road as she carried a single travel bag over her shoulder and walked away from the only home she had ever known. The pine trees stood silent around her, their dark silhouettes fading into the pale light of dawn. She told herself not to look back. Yet when she reached the crest of a small hill, nearly half a mile from the pack border, she stopped. The distant rooftops of Blackwood Village rested beneath the rising sun, peaceful and familiar. For a moment memories flooded her mind. Winter festivals, long afternoons helping children learn to read, quiet evenings delivering medicine to elderly pack members. Every memory felt like a page from someone else's life. Emily blinked away the tears gathering in her eyes and turned forward again. Behind her, Blackwood Pack continued without her. Or at least everyone believed it would. Back inside the territory, life appeared to return to normal. The investigation was officially closed. The moon crest was returned to its display case. Pack meetings resumed. Businesses opened. Hunters followed their regular schedules. On the surface, everything seemed unchanged. Yet an invisible shift had begun. Several days later, Lucas stood inside the council chamber reviewing reports from local leaders. Normally, he completed the task quickly. Today he found himself rereading the same page 3 times. His concentration drifted. Small problems seemed to appear everywhere. A supply shipment arrived late. A healer reported unexpected staff shortages. Several elderly residents complained that scheduled assistance visits had stopped without warning. Lucas rubbed his temple. Why are so many support programs suddenly struggling? He asked. One council member glanced down at his notes. Most of them were organized by Emily. Lucas paused. The answer irritated him more than it should have. Then assign someone else. We have tried. The council member hesitated. No one realized how much she handled until she left. Lucas said nothing. Another report landed on the table. Then another. Community projects delayed. Volunteer numbers falling. Missed appointments. Forgotten requests. The problems were not catastrophic. They were simply everywhere. Like missing threads slowly unraveling an entire blanket. Later that evening, Lucas walked alone through the village square. The air carried the scent of fresh rain. Children played near the fountain while merchants closed their shops for the night. Everything looked normal. Yet something felt different. Quieter. Less welcoming. He passed a flower garden beside the healing center and stopped. The garden had always been carefully maintained. Bright colors once filled every corner. Now several sections sat neglected. Weeds pushed through the soil. Dead leaves gathered along the stone borders. An elderly woman noticed him standing there. Emily used to care for those every Saturday morning, she said gently. Lucas looked at the garden. Someone else can take over. The woman smiled sadly. That is what everyone keeps saying. She walked away before he could answer. Lucas remained there long after sunset, staring at the neglected flowers. For reasons he could not explain, an unfamiliar feeling settled over him. It was not guilt. Not yet. But for the first time since Emily's departure, certainty no longer felt quite as solid as it once had. 3 weeks passed, and the quiet unease spreading through Blackwood Pack slowly transformed into something no one could ignore. It began with small things. The community pantry ran short on supplies because no one remembered the network Emily had created with neighboring territories. The healing center became overwhelmed after several volunteers stopped showing up, each assuming someone else would cover the work. Elderly residents who once received weekly visits found themselves sitting alone for days. None of these problems were disasters by themselves. Together, they created a feeling that something important had vanished. Lucas noticed it everywhere. He noticed it in delayed reports, in unfinished projects, in the tired faces of people who normally greeted him with confidence. More than once, he found himself reaching for his phone before remembering there was no reason to call Emily anymore. She was gone. One rainy afternoon, Lucas attended a meeting with local business owners inside the village hall. What should have been a routine discussion quickly turned into a list of frustrations. Missing records, scheduling mistakes, forgotten commitments. Finally, an older merchant shook his head and sighed. Emily used to keep track of all this. The room fell quiet. Lucas felt irritation flare inside him. One person should not be responsible for an entire community. She never wanted the responsibility, the merchant replied. She just helped because nobody else did. Several people nodded in agreement. Lucas said nothing. That evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows of the Alpha house, Vanessa joined him for dinner. Over the past few weeks, she had spent more time by his side. She smiled often. She offered support whenever challenges appeared. To everyone watching, she looked like the perfect future Luna. Yet something about her presence felt strangely hollow. Lucas could never explain why. You look exhausted, Vanessa said gently. The pack has been demanding lately. Lucas set down his glass of water. There are more problems than usual. Every territory goes through difficult periods. She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. You cannot blame yourself for everything. Lucas nodded, but the reassurance did not help. Later that night, unable to sleep, he walked through the dark halls of the Alpha house. The building felt unusually empty. As he passed the archive room, a faint light caught his attention beneath a partially opened door. Curious, he stepped inside. The room smelled of old paper and cedar shelves. On a nearby desk sat several storage boxes filled with records. One box had been left open. Lucas glanced down and froze. The files were labeled in neat handwriting he recognized immediately. Emily's handwriting. He pulled out the first folder. Volunteer schedules. The second contained medical assistance requests. The third detailed donations she had organized during the previous winter. Folder after folder revealed the same thing. Hundreds of hours of work. Careful planning. Endless acts of service performed without recognition. Lucas sat down slowly. As he turned another page, a folded note slipped onto the desk. He unfolded it. The message was simple. A list of names belonging to struggling families, followed by a reminder written in Emily's familiar script. Check on them again next week. They always say they are fine when they are not. Lucas stared at the sentence for a long time. Something shifted uncomfortably inside his chest. For the first time since her departure, he was no longer thinking about the accusation. He was thinking about the person. And the more he looked at the evidence she had left behind, the harder it became to reconcile the woman described in those files with the woman he had condemned. The discovery in the archive room refused to leave Lucas alone. For the next several days, he found himself returning to the boxes Emily had organized. Each folder revealed another piece of a woman he suddenly realized he had never truly known. There were handwritten reminders to check on widows living alone. Lists of donations she had quietly arranged without attaching her name. Letters from grateful families thanking her for helping them through difficult seasons. The more he read, the more uncomfortable he became. Nothing matched the image of someone willing to betray the pack for personal gain. Late one afternoon, Lucas sat alone in his office reviewing old security reports connected to the missing moon crest. Rain tapped softly against the windows while stacks of documents covered his desk. He had read most of them before, but this time he paid attention to details he had previously ignored. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door opened slowly. One of the younger administrative assistants stepped inside. Her name was Claire. Quiet and dependable, she rarely spoke unless necessary. Today she looked nervous. "Alpha Lucas," she said carefully. "There is something I think you should see." Lucas frowned. "What is it?" Claire hesitated before placing a small data tablet on the desk. "I found this while organizing archived security footage from the moon ceremony." Lucas immediately sat forward. "Security footage?" Claire nodded. "It was never included in the original review because the camera was considered partially obstructed. A strange feeling settled in his stomach. He activated the file. Grainy footage appeared on the screen. The image showed a hallway near the eastern corridor of the Alpha house. Lucas watched silently as several figures moved through the frame. Then his heartbeat slowed. Vanessa appeared. Not once. Multiple times. He watched her glance around before entering a restricted storage area. Minutes later, she emerged carrying a small silver object. The moon crest. Lucas stared at the screen. His pulse pounded in his ears. "When was this discovered?" he asked quietly. "This morning," Claire answered. "I checked the timestamp 3 times because I thought I must have been mistaken." Lucas replayed the footage. Then again, and again. Each viewing made the truth impossible to deny. Emily had been innocent. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. Every memory from the ceremony returned with painful clarity. Emily standing alone beneath the lantern light. Emily trying to explain. Emily looking at him with disbelief as he chose suspicion over trust. Lucas closed his eyes. For the first time since becoming Alpha, certainty abandoned him completely. "There is more," Claire said softly. Lucas opened his eyes. "What else?" She swallowed hard. The guard who claimed he saw Emily leaving the Alpha house submitted a correction this morning. Lucas stared at her. A correction? He admitted Vanessa approached him before the investigation and convinced him he must have seen Emily. Silence filled the office. Lucas looked back at the frozen image on the screen. Vanessa standing there with the moon crest in her hands. The evidence was undeniable. The accusation had been fabricated. The investigation had been manipulated. And he had accepted it without question. A sharp ache settled deep in his chest. Not because he had been deceived. Because he suddenly understood the look Emily gave him during the gathering hall. It was not anger. It was heartbreak. She had trusted him to know her. Trusted him to believe in her character. Instead, he had become the person who destroyed that trust. As rain continued falling beyond the windows, Lucas realized a terrible truth. Emily had not lost her home that day. He had taken it from her. Lucas did not sleep that night. The security footage played over and over in his mind long after the office had gone dark. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily standing in the gathering hall. He saw the confusion in her expression when the accusations began. He heard her voice insisting she was innocent. Most of all, he remembered the moment she looked at him after his decision. At the time, he had interpreted that look as disappointment. Now he understood it had been something far worse. It had been betrayal. The next morning, the entire leadership council gathered inside the Alpha house. The atmosphere felt tense from the moment Lucas entered the room. Vanessa Hale sat near the far end of the table, dressed elegantly, as always. Her confident smile remained firmly in place. For the first time, Lucas noticed how carefully constructed that smile seemed. "Before we begin," Lucas said, placing the tablet containing the footage onto the table, "there is something everyone needs to see." The room fell silent. One by one, council members watched the recording. Expressions shifted from curiosity to confusion and finally to shock. Vanessa's face lost color. "This cannot be accurate," she said quickly. "The footage must be corrupted." No one responded. The evidence spoke for itself. Lucas remained calm, but inside he felt as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. "You manipulated the investigation," he said quietly. Vanessa looked around the room desperately. "I was trying to protect the pack." "By framing an innocent person?" one council member asked. Vanessa opened her mouth, but could not answer. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt much longer. Lucas stared at her. For weeks he had accepted her version of events without question. For weeks he had allowed a lie to become reality. Yet even as the truth unfolded, his thoughts kept returning to Emily. Where was she now? Had she found somewhere safe to stay? Had she spent every day believing no one cared enough to search for the truth? The questions twisted inside him. After the meeting ended, Lucas walked through the village alone. The sky was bright blue, and children laughed near the fountain. Life continued as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. Near the healing center, he stopped beside a wooden bench where Emily often sat, while organizing volunteer schedules. The memory arrived unexpectedly. Years earlier, he had passed by after a difficult council session. Emily had noticed his frustration immediately. Without asking questions, she had simply handed him a cup of coffee and told him that leaders were allowed to be tired too. At the time, he had barely thanked her. Now the memory felt like a knife turning slowly inside his chest. Another followed. Emily staying late during a snowstorm to help stranded families. Emily spending her own savings on medicine for children whose parents could not afford treatment. Emily smiling every time someone else received credit for work she had quietly completed herself. Lucas lowered his head. The truth hurt more with every passing hour. Not because she had been innocent, because he had never truly seen her while she stood right in front of him. And for the first time since becoming Alpha, Lucas Blackwood felt something he could not command, control, or silence. Regret. The search began the following morning. Lucas delegated counsel duties, postponed meetings, and ignored every objection raised by advisors who insisted an Alpha should remain inside his territory. None of it mattered. Every hour that passed felt like another reminder of the mistake he had made. The first lead brought him to a small town nearly 60 miles south of Blackwood Pack. A shopkeeper remembered seeing a young woman matching Emily's description, helping an elderly traveler repair a wagon wheel. The second lead pointed him toward a farming community where a healer named Emily had spent several days treating exhausted workers during a heat wave. Everywhere he went, the stories sounded the same. She helped people. She asked for nothing in return. She moved on before anyone could properly thank her. With each story, Lucas felt both proud and ashamed. Proud of the woman she was. Ashamed that he had only begun to understand her after losing her. Meanwhile, Emily had built something entirely new. Several counties away, in a quiet lakeside town called Silver Creek, she spent her days working at a community clinic. The building was small, but it was filled with warmth. Children waved when she walked through town. Elderly residents stopped to chat with her outside local stores. For the first time in years, she lived without worrying about expectations, politics, or whispers following her every step. The pain of what happened had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned how to breathe again. One crisp autumn afternoon, she carried a box of medical supplies across the clinic parking lot when a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. Emily. Her heart froze. Slowly, she turned around. Lucas stood several yards away. He looked different. Tired. Less certain. The confident Alpha she remembered seemed weighed down by something invisible. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind stirred fallen leaves across the pavement. Somewhere nearby, children laughed on a playground. Life continued moving while they stood trapped between past and present. I found you, Lucas said quietly. Emily tightened her grip on the box. Why? The single word struck harder than any accusation. Lucas opened his mouth, but the answer suddenly felt inadequate. Because every reason sounded selfish. Because every explanation arrived too late. I came to apologize, he finally said. Emily studied him carefully. Months ago, seeing him would have made her heart race. Now she mostly felt tired. You traveled all this way for an apology? For the truth. A sad smile touched her lips. The truth mattered when I was standing in front of you asking you to believe me. Lucas lowered his gaze. There was no defense against that. No argument. No justification. Only silence. Emily looked toward the clinic entrance. Patients were waiting for her. People depended on her. She had responsibilities now that had nothing to do with Blackwood Pack. Nothing to do with him. I am glad you learned what happened, she said softly. Truly. Lucas looked up hopefully. Then she continued. But learning the truth does not erase what you chose to do with the lie. The words settled between them like a door quietly closing. And for the first time, Lucas understood that finding Emily had been the easy part. Earning even a fraction of her trust again would be far more difficult. Lucas remained in Silver Creek for several days. He did not pressure Emily. He did not ask for promises. Instead, he did something he should have done months earlier. He listened. He watched her move through the town she now called home. He saw the way children ran toward her after school. He saw neighbors stop her on the sidewalk simply to say thank you. He saw the quiet respect she had earned without titles, without status, and without anyone telling people she was important. She had built a life from the pieces he left behind. One afternoon, a public gathering was held in the town square to celebrate the opening of a new community center. Emily stood among volunteers, smiling as families explored the building they had spent months creating together. Lucas remained near the back of the crowd. For once, he was not the center of attention. And for once, he did not want to be. When the mayor stepped forward to thank everyone involved, he surprised Emily by calling her onto the stage. Applause filled the square. Many people contributed, the mayor said, But this project would not exist without Emily Carter. She reminded this town what community truly means. Emily's eyes widened as people cheered around her. Lucas felt a painful knot tighten in his chest. Not because he was jealous, because he realized he had once taken all of this for granted. After the event ended, he found her sitting alone beside the lake just beyond town. The water reflected the golden colors of sunset. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lucas broke the silence. I spent months thinking I was a good leader. Emily looked across the water. And now I think I confused authority with wisdom. A faint smile touched her lips. That is a difficult lesson. Lucas nodded. The hardest one of my life. He took a slow breath. I cannot undo what I did. I know that. I cannot ask you to forget it either. Emily remained quiet. But I needed you to know something. He looked at her. The mistake that keeps me awake is not believing a lie. It is realizing I never trusted the truth that was standing right in front of me. Emily lowered her eyes. The sincerity in his voice made it difficult to hold on to anger. Not because the pain had disappeared, because she could finally see that he carried it too. I forgave you a long time ago, she said softly. Lucas looked up in surprise. You did. Forgiveness is how I moved forward. She paused. But forgiveness is not the same thing as trust. The words hung gently between them. Honest. Unavoidable. Lucas nodded. Then I will not ask for trust. He stood and took a step back. I will earn it if I can. And if I cannot, I will still spend the rest of my life being better than the man who hurt you. Emily watched him carefully. For the first time since he arrived, she saw no expectation in his eyes. No demand. No entitlement. Only humility. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, something inside her finally loosened. The wound had not vanished. The past had not changed. Yet the future no longer felt trapped by either one. Months later, visitors to Silver Creek would often notice a tall alpha helping repair community buildings, carrying supplies, and volunteering beside everyone else without seeking recognition. And whenever someone asked why he worked so hard, Lucas would simply smile and glance toward the woman whose kindness had transformed an entire town. Because in the end, the greatest truth he ever learned was that real strength was never found in power. It was found in humility, in accountability, and in the courage to become better after discovering how wrong you were.